You probably had the experience of being in a room with someone or sitting across from a partner and feeling something in your body that your mind hadn't caught up to yet. It's not an emotion exactly, but something more physical, a tightening in the chest, a quality of heaviness that settles in before the conversation has gone anywhere difficult. Or the opposite, an opening, a kind of ease, the specific feeling of something in you relaxing in the presence of a particular person before you've consciously decided whether you trust them. Most people dismiss this. They file it under mood or projection or the vague category of vibes, which is the word we use when we notice something real but don't have a framework for taking it seriously. What I want to look at today is what that is, not metaphorically, but structurally, because the body is not having a feeling, it's doing something much more specific. It's receiving information. And the traditions that map this most carefully, like Sufism, human design, the somatic knowledge that runs through um, the practice across cultures. We're describing the same mechanism that neuroscience is now measuring. The body is a receiver. Before anything else, that's what it is. So, in episode one, we looked at a Sufi concept called al haq, which means the real, as the field everything is inside of. And in episode 8, we looked at intuitive intelligence as a perceptual capacity that operates faster than conscious analysis. This is where those two things meet. The body is the instrument through which contact with the real most often arrives. Here's a number worth sitting with. The nervous system processes around 11 million bits of information per second. The conscious mind has access to roughly 40 of them. 40 out of 11 million. Everything else is being received, processed, and responded to by systems the mind never even touches. Which means the body knows things the mind doesn't, not as a metaphor, as a mechanical description of how the information processing actually works. And in a culture that treats the mind as the primary instrument of knowing, the thing you consult, the thing you trust, the body's intelligence is almost entirely unaccounted for. Not because it isn't operating, but because no one told most people it was worth paying attention to. This Sufi concept of kashif, direct perception, unveiling, isn't primarily a mental experience. The traditions are consistent on this. Real kashif arrives through the body first, a contraction in the chest that signals danger before the mind has assembled any evidence, an expansion, a quality of opening that signals alignment before there is any logical case for it. Maybe a sudden stillness that marks the arrival of something monumental. These aren't feelings in the emotional sense, they're perceptual events. The body registering information from the field it's inside of. The Sufi masters developed specific practices for refining this capacity, not because it was exotic, because they understood the body's reception can be clear or contaminated depending on the condition of the receiver. A body held in chronic contraction from unprocessed fear receives differently than one trained toward openness. The practices of dhikr, of breath, of specific physical postures, these aren't incidental to this practice. They're the technical work of calibrating the instrument. Human design maps this through the body graph, the defined and undefined centers, the solar plexus, the spleen, the sacral, the heart, each operating as a specific receptor. A defined splenic center receives survival intelligence as instantaneous physical knowing. An undefined solar plexus is designed to receive and amplify the emotional field of others, enormously valuable when understood, and sometimes it's destabilizing. These aren't personality types. They're descriptions of how different parts of the body's receiving system are configured. Here's what happens in people who have strong somatic intelligence but no framework for it. And in particular, what it produces in intimate relationships, where the body's receiving capacity is most active and most frequently overridden. First pattern is chronic override. The body signals clearly contraction, expansion, the specific quality of knowing in the gut or chest or throat. And the mind dismisses it, not because the signals aren't clear or accurate, but because the person has been taught explicitly or implicitly that the body's intelligence is inferior to rational analysis. In relationships, this is where things get costly. The person who felt the contraction on the first date and talked themselves out of it. The one who noticed something in their partner's tone that the words contradicted and decided the words were more reliable. The body was reading the field accurately, the mind overruled it. And the cost of that override accumulated, sometimes over years, in ways that felt inevitable in retrospect, but were visible from the beginning to the instrument that was actually paying attention. Second pattern is the opposite and equally difficult. A person who feels everything intensely but has no way to sort it. The body is highly responsive, picking up not only its own intelligence, but the emotional and energetic field of everyone around it. In a relationship, this can look like being overwhelmed by the partner's emotional state to the point where the person loses track of their own, or finding that certain relationships are physically depleting in ways that are difficult to explain and even harder to justify to the partner who isn't experiencing anything similar. This isn't weakness. It's an undefined solar plexus or an open spleen operating without context. The person is receiving the partner's field, amplifying it, feeling it more intensely than the partner themselves does, and then often attributing the resulting experience to their own psychology rather than to what they're actually picking up from the relationship's field. When this is understood, when the person can say, "This feeling isn't mine, it's what I'm receiving from this relationship," everything changes about what the data means and what to do with it. So, what changes when the body is understood as a receiver rather than managed as a vehicle? The quality of available information goes up. When the body's signals are being received and taken seriously, like I said before, contraction, expansion, or the specific quality of alignment or misalignment, the data available for any decision increases significantly, not replacing rational analysis, but running alongside it. A person operating both channels simultaneously has access to a fuller picture than the one running only on the conscious mind. In relationships, this is the difference between choosing a partner based on declared information, so like what they say about themselves and what looks good on paper and what makes logical sense, and choosing based on the full read, what the body registered in the first 10 minutes, whether the field between the two people produces expansion or contraction over time, whether proximity to this person consistently leaves more or less of the self available afterward. These are data points. They've been available the whole time. Most people just weren't treating them as such. Also, the relationship with solitude and environment changes. The body receives most clearly when the environment isn't producing competing signs. This is the structural reason that caves and wilderness and quiet have been used across traditions as conditions for direct perception, not romanticism. The instrument works better with less interference. For someone whose body is a highly sensitive receiver, whose undefined centers are picking up the field of everyone around them, time alone isn't a preference. It's the condition under which they can identify what they're actually receiving versus what they absorbed from whoever they were just with. In a relationship, this means something specific. The person who comes home from time with their partner feeling less themselves, not because anything went wrong, but because their receiving system absorbed the partner's field and hasn't yet separated from it, needs a different account of that experience than the one most relationships offer. It's not withdrawal, it's not a sign of incompatibility. It's the instrument recalibrating itself. Understanding it as such changes both the person's relationship with their own need for solitude and the partner's relationship with not taking it personally. And lastly, physical symptoms start to mean something different when the body's signals are being systematically ignored or when it's carrying material from the family field that doesn't belong to it personally. Symptoms emerge, not as malfunction, but as escalation. The body moves from quiet signal to louder signal to symptom because the quieter communications weren't being received. It's a system increasing signal strength until the message gets through. Understanding symptoms as communication rather than malfunction changes both the questions being asked and what interventions actually make sense. In devotional practice, this is foundational. Prayer, that's only mental, only words, only thought, reaches a ceiling that prayer that includes the body doesn't. The repetitions that move through the breath, the postures of prayer that align the spine, these aren't decorative. They're the technical work of bringing the full receiver online. Contact with the divine through the body isn't more primitive than contact through the mind. In the Sufi understanding, at least, it's often more direct. So, in conclusion, I can say that the body has been receiving the whole time in relationships, in rooms, in the presence of particular people in particular places. It's been reading the field and reporting back. The question is whether anyone is paying attention to the instrument picking up. I'll see you next time.